Hello to all you mindset growers out there. Today we have Bryony Thomas on the podcast, and she is awesome, hands down awesome. So she has run her own marketing agency, Watertight Marketing, for 10 years and has written an amazing book of the same title, which is just one of the best business books I've ever read. So I'm honored to have her on the show. And her business has been successful from the start, but she's just been having really solid growth year on year for the last 10 years, and it's now got to the point where it's suddenly become really big, and it's like it's really cool to be able to talk to her about the experience she's had growing it. So she takes us through the story of starting the business, launching the book, and just key insights into turning a traditional time-based business as an agency model into like a really scalable machine that creates value for thousands of people. And she also gives us some amazing life advice. So some examples include
I closed the door, I turned off my email, I didn't engage in social media, and I hid. And I came out when it was finished. A number of people recently have said, gosh, you're everywhere. What a brilliant overnight to success you are. Overnight over the last 10 years. I've turned clients down when I didn't know how I was going to pay the mortgage the next month.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sam Harris, and it is my true honour and pleasure to host you here on the Growth Mindset podcast. I talk to amazing individuals about how they achieve their dreams and break down the strategies it takes to lead explosive tech businesses to being paid to travel the world. I deep dive into topics such as Bitcoin and fintech, or just how to get stuff done, with the goal of increasing our own collective wisdom and making us all happier, healthier and wealthier. Who doesn't want that?
If you love the Growth Mindset podcast, you should check out a great new podcast called Next Year Now. The Next Year Now show is all about uncovering everyday, purposeful habits and practices to help you thrive at work and in life. So again, that's the Next Year Now podcast with Tom Hefner. I have a great recommendation for other business owners trying to advertise their business locally. So pay-per-click can quickly bleed you dry and review sites can scam you. But Scout Puppy Local has helped thousands of business owners easily become a trusted local merchant. Scout Puppy builds a one-page website hosted on their platform. The great thing about this is that they write all of the content. They add pictures, video, links to your own website and social media, and they fill it with really strong keywords so you get found. They submit the one-page website to over 200 search engines to help you compete with the big guys. And they'll write an industry-specific blog every 3 months. So basically, you get a one-page customer-acquiring revenue machine. It's pretty awesome. It starts from $89 a month with no contract. So go to scoutpuppy.com and click Add Business in the menu bar to sign up. And in their words, sit back and relax. Or on my advice, go and work on everything else in your business like a real entrepreneur.
You can grab 50% off your first order if you sign up now online using Growth Mindset 50. It's your voucher code, and you can do that at scoutpuppy.com.
On that note, let's jump into the episode.
Watertight Marketing is the name of my book, which came out in January 2013. But really, the book is about 20 to 25% of the whole methodology and the kind of toolbox of thinking tools that we've put together for marketers and business owners to make confident decisions. But mainly, people know it as a book, but it is an end-to-end methodology with lots of tools, frameworks, and models to help you think and make good decisions about your marketing.
Okay. So you had the whole idea for the Watertight methodology yourself, or did you start writing the book because of you working with clients? Like, how did it come to be exactly?
I would say that the Watertight marketing methodology and the business model that I now run has been a culmination of everything I've ever done. And that might sound like a big all-encompassing answer, or perhaps sitting on the fence. But if you look through my career history, and indeed back to my childhood, there are things that come together to get me to where I am now. So my first 12 years was a very traditional career. I started in ad agencies, ended up as director of marketing for Experian Marketing Services when I was 28. And I've done marketing diplomas. I have an MBA, very traditional, big brands, all of that. And so I've studied a lot. I've read a lot. and I've worked with very demanding clients. When I set up on my own, which was 2008, I wanted to work with smaller businesses where a difference could be made more quickly. And this kind of goes back to my childhood. So I spent my infancy living in a hippie commune on the Preseli Hills in West Wales. I used to milk goats before school, which is not, it's not the start you think of, is it, for a business owner or someone in marketing or in a corporate job? No. But I would say my childhood very much underpins Watertight marketing in terms of who I've chosen to work with and also the values that underpin it. So when I started in 2008, whenever I met smaller business owners and they told me their marketing wasn't working, I knew that wasn't really the M word they had in mind. What they're saying is they'd risked their mortgage, their marriage, their mental health, and it wasn't working. And so I kind of feel almost compelled to help them. And so I kind of I got the methodology in terms of the conceptual frameworks, the templates, the tools, the kind of thinking tools that I've created, definitely happened. Firstly, drawing on the decade or so of experience as a professional and schooled marketer. But then taking what I'd learned on those big brands and making it work on, even the most modest of budgets. It's about outthinking rather than outspending your competition. So I would draw all the same pictures, use all the same analogies with each of the clients, and then I was often being asked to speak at local networking events and marketing events. And so the imagery, the conceptual imagery and frameworks probably happened by virtue of being asked to talk it to a room. So what I had drawn on whiteboards or with Post-it notes became something that could be expressed, one to many. And because I was using all the same analogies, drawing all the same pictures, and we were turning business down at 3-1, I thought if I wrote a book, I wouldn't have to say no to anyone. I could at least give them a copy of the book.
Yeah, it is a really good book obviously there's lots more you can then go and do, but you can just work through the book and it
absolutely
does everything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and more than that, you can go and download the workbooks. So which come, that they're included in the price of the book. You register your book on the website and you get the workbooks. The workbooks took me a year in themselves. It took me four years to write the book. The workbooks took another year. And then all the video content and stuff that goes alongside our training programs and our online programs and mentoring programs and such like. We've got 85 hours of video.
Wow.
Probably more,
Yes.
You can see why I've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah. So when you first had the idea for the book and then you took 4 years of writing it, did you have a book, what's the word, signing in place, publishing deal or anything, or did you just know that you're going to be able to sell it to your clients already?
Yeah, good question. Really good question. So I recently was interviewed on the Right Book podcast, as in not wrong, the Right Book. And we were talking a lot about publishing deals and how the publishing industry has changed so radically. Certainly in the last several years, there are people who write a book and upload it onto whatever it's called on Amazon, and you've got a book, haven't you? So I initially went to the traditional publishers because I kind of thought that's what one does in order to be published. I thought I needed a publisher with a capital P. And so I did send off book proposals to, all the names that you would have heard of. And I got an offer. So I did get an offer from one of the largest publishers of business books in the world. But they wanted me to make some quite significant changes. And one of the key things, and it was the pivotal moment for me, was that they wanted me to choose a title with a glib promise. They wanted me to have a subtitle like double your business in 2 weeks or something. And I wasn't willing to do it. So during that time, I had also joined the Professional Speaking Association, and I met a lady called Mindy Gibbons-Klein, who runs a cooperative publishing business. And so I realized that there was another way of doing it. And so the publisher that I'm with is, I paid to have that done. I paid to publish the book. And then we share, we share the rights. Now, not the rights, sorry, the income. The rights are all mine. And that's the key point. The rights are all mine. So not only would a traditional publisher have wanted me to compromise perhaps on some of my values or my style, they also, the copyright part of it is quite tricky. And because my book is essentially the intellectual property on which my entire business model rests, I couldn't, for the long-term health of my business, I couldn't sign the copyright over to a publisher.
Was it harder to get traction initially, do you think, than compared to if you'd gone with a publisher?
No, it's one of the myths. I think people think that publishers do your marketing for you, and they simply don't. Publishers choose safe bets.
Yeah.
They are they're there to make money. They're not there to help you make money. So the reason they go through such a process of choosing the titles that they publish is because they choose safe bets. They're not going to take a book that was going to be unknown and unless it's the next book by Katie Price, they're not going to put a pile of marketing energy behind it. So most business books that are published, certainly in the UK, you're pretty lucky if you sell more than about 500 copies. So a business book in the UK that a publisher would think was a safe bet would probably be estimated at selling 5,000 copies in its lifetime.
Wow.
So I think people just, if you're thinking of publishing a book, really need to understand the industry and understand what it means. And so that being the case, I didn't think there was any benefit in using a publisher. I'm a marketer, so clearly I would do a lot of my own stuff anyway. I also crowdfunded the book. So in order to pay for the publishing, I did a crowdfunding campaign in 2011. And so I kind of had a little posse of cheerleaders who'd all put money in, which was great for getting the word out initially.
Yeah, definitely. And they kind of got the incentive to try and talk to all their friends that would use the book as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also there's something very motivating, isn't there, when a deadline has moved from a year to 2 years to 3 years to 4 years, when people have put their hand in their pocket and given me money, then it made me finish it.
Yeah, you can't really sort of stop and just sort of leave it as a side project that no one really knows about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, definitely a good incentive model. I like it. So after you did the crowdfunding and then released it, what sort of marketing did you do around getting more traction with the book?
The year that my book came out was a really difficult year for me personally. I had I have a 6-year-old, so I had given birth midway through writing the book. So I had a toddler, and then my dad got a terminal cancer diagnosis shortly before the book came out, and so it went from being very important to really not. And I can't, to a certain extent, I can barely remember the coming out. I did do some things, but really not much. He'd had the cancer diagnosis just before Christmas. 2 weeks after the book came out, we were told that it was terminal. So he was midway through chemo when the book came out, and then he died 6 weeks after that. But we had been told he'd live for longer, so I'd cleared my diary and I was heading down to look after him, and he died. So the year that it came out, when lots of people would have been doing a launch and book tour and whatever, I hid. And I came back to it a year later, and it'd been in its bestsellers all year. So that was nice.
Well, I guess that's silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, well, I had a book birthday party. So a year later, so on the anniversary of the book coming out, I had a book birthday party, which is a good thing to say to people, is that when a book comes out, feels like a momentous thing for you as the author, but really you can launch a book every day in which you own the copyright, and you own the copyright on a book for 70 years. And providing what you've written is evergreen, it's not tied to the latest trend or fad, then there's no reason not to be doing launch activity all the time.
Yeah.
Because, every new person who encounters it, it's launch day for them.
Yeah, definitely. It's after you've had like your first 1,000 people read it and start to share it, it's like it makes much more sense to
exactly
launch when you've got some people that actually want to come and attend, rather than a bunch of people attending something when they've never even read it or know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So although it happened to me, it was forced on me in that way. I actually think if I were asked now to recommend to somebody how to launch a business book, I would probably say, when the book is first published, have a launch party to say thank you. Have a launch party with your friends, your family, the people who made it happen, and enjoy the moment. And then build in a series of events over the first 5 years of your book that mark milestones, that bring a community together, that showcase the results that your book is affecting in the world, rather than thinking you have to do it as a launch.
Yeah.
I just think there are better ways.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It sounds like, obviously I have no idea about these things, but yeah, it sounds like a much more sensible way of doing it than just going straight for a launch and then sort of forgetting about it. And it does sort of tie into your general Watertight marketing sort of things of where people sort of falling off if they've read it and they don't have anything else to do next. So you've turned like the whole book into like quite a large business to get involved in at different levels, and like it's quite a big organization. So how did you go to creating this whole like kind of world?
It's an ecosystem, really, isn't it? So as we're chatting, we are in August 2018. And it's interesting that you say that it's a large organization, because it's not. I have one full-time employee.
Yeah, wow.
So there's me and one other full-time employee and 2 part-time people who are retained within the business. So the head office, kind of Watertight Towers, is usually 2 people, and then there are a further 2 people who spend something between 20 to 30 hours a week working on HQ activities. The licensing, so the people who are independent marketing consultants can use our toolkit with their own clients. They become certified practitioners. We have 27 of those in the UK at the moment.
Wow.
Until October last year, that was 10. And we kind of opened the doors for new licensees for about a month in October last year, and then closed them again so that we could get people through the training process. So we will be opening the doors again on that from September. So it's kind of annual when we have an intake. And so, we went from 10 to 27 in a month last year. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, we will have opened the doors again in September for a month, and we'll see where we get to. I would be fairly confident of hitting 50 licensed practitioners in the UK by the end of 2019.
Yeah, nice. And then, yeah, it seems like you are growing lots. I read the book, I guess, like 5 years ago, and I went to a few things that you were running and was really into it. But then I sold my business and stopped doing so much marketing and sort of wasn't really thinking about it. And like now I've started looking into everything you're doing again, it suddenly seems like it has grown a lot.
Yes, it genuinely has. I mean, it's so turnover growth has been about 60-70% year on year.
Wow.
I just did 10 days of 10 years of entrepreneurial learning. I did 10 minutes each day, Facebook Live for 10 days. And I talked about being a business tortoise and how a number of people recently have said, gosh, you're everywhere. What a brilliant overnight to success you are. Overnight over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I think I would observe that it feels to me a little bit like we're breaking ground. So if you were building a skyscraper, then I think we've just finished the foundations and we're probably up to about floor 1. Yeah. So we're just kind of breaking ground, if that makes sense. And a lot of the work that we've done, certainly in the last 5 years, and for the 5 years before that, when I was a Time for Money consultant, has been preparatory. They've been for what is coming next.
Cool. So yeah, well, 2 questions to go. So 1, what is coming next?
Yeah, great question. So software is what's coming next, and I know you as a software entrepreneur will probably nod and smile. So one of the things that we are imminently launching at our Confidence and Clarity conference, which is our first annual conference this year in September, is a diagnostic tool. It's an online diagnostic tool, and it outputs the profit priority profile. So it feels a bit like a psychometric test. So you sit and you answer quite quick fire questions, and that will do a diagnostic to help people understand where they're leaving money on the table effectively. So where are the leaks in their marketing journey? And so that is literally in development right now. I am in fact expecting a link this afternoon to a test version. So that's coming immediately next. And what that would build onto is then software that would help you to plan the tweaks you're going to make, to track progress over time as you move it forward, and to use a number of the thinking tools that we have lend themselves to online planning tools that would kind of plug in. So if you imagine you're using Salesforce or Infusionsoft or any of the CRMs, the vision I have is of a marketing planning software that sits above the systems in which you spend money to help you determine whether you should.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
it's not a small vision, and
But-
and the licensing, of course, can go in. The next port of call for us would be other English-speaking capitalist economies in which the methodology would work. So thinking small, as you can see.
Yeah, like you said about like the tortoise philosophers, and you've worked very slowly up towards that with just like very much dedication to what it is you're getting to.
Yes.
And not really sort of waving from the past. And well, before you said software, I was going to say you've actually done a really good job of like doing a traditional business model, which seems very unscalable, like just consulting on your time, but you've managed to scale it like really well to be able to running like conferences and
Yes.
and all these extra practitioners kind of doing your work for you and licensing stuff is.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very well observed. And I think it's one of those things that when people kind of look under the bonnet of what we're doing, it's probably the second question anybody asks me. The first is, what do I do with my marketing? And the second is, how have you done what you've done? And the way that it works as a business model is because it is an end-to-end piece of intellectual property. So I sketched that model out before I wrote the book. So rather than time for money consulting, where you use your general experience as a marketer to help someone, we don't do marketing for people. So we're not a marketing services provider. We have a toolbox of thinking tools, and we can train people on using those tools. So we're not a marketing agency. We don't do marketing. It's almost like the overseas development approach to marketing. We teach you to fish. Yeah, it's unusual, isn't it, to see something that is usually considered the skill of an individual or knowledge, and to be able to scale it. We have online programs. We have people who pay monthly license fees, etc. And so the two markets that we serve are clients who wish to grow their companies and want to understand and train their team to do their marketing well and to use these tools. And the other is marketing consultants who wish to use our tools with clients like that.
So what is a setback or failure that set you up for a later success?
I don't know how to say it. It sounds so melodramatic to say it, but I kind of feel like the year that I stepped away from my business, although it was a year in grief, and I was, I did literally hide, and I couldn't really go to client meetings without bursting out crying at some point, which was hardly professional. And so in that year, I got the licensing contracts drawn up. I recorded the first versions of the video that make up our master plan program. I hid and created a body of content that, had I been running a business alongside, probably would have taken me 10 years. And I think I did it in 1 year. So having that real, almost a societally approved reason to hide. So using I went into my shell. There was a tortoise in its shell for a year. And it allowed me to create lots of stuff. And I did create a lot of stuff. So I've been talking about the second edition of Watertight Marketing now for 4 years. And because I'm now running the business that we've described, the carving out time to sit and do that is I've been saying it'll be ready in 6 months for 4 years. And so that year, which at the time felt like a very frustrating delay, I think has created the platform on which I've been able to scale the business.
It was really useful.
Yeah.
As being a great double analogy of the use of tortoises. Yeah, it does sound like potentially it was like quite a good way in terms of, like, I was asking you, how did you manage to turn it into such a scalable thing when it sounds like it's just a very unscalable business model of your time? Like,
Yes.
it does sort of really, it's like a forcing function to make you step away from
Yes.
it.
I closed the door, I turned off my email, I didn't engage in social media, and I hid.
Yeah.
And I came out when it was finished.
Yeah, just like kind of backwards business advice to how to make
Completely.
your business grow much faster.
Slow down. Yeah. You'll find that. I think you will find the backwards business logic runs through almost everything you would hear me say is counterintuitive to what most people say. So, I say turn your marketing upside down. I say turn your customer inside out. Build it all backwards. Slow down. I'm in almost every glib classic business truism, I will usually go, nah, you don't do it like that.
Yeah, that's exactly the conversation we had a month ago. And I was like, so I'm thinking about raising like a small seed round or something. You're like, Sam, don't bother. Just go work with some clients. Don't be stupid, Sam. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
I've just been told to do that by an investor. And it's like, oh, okay, the opposite direction now. But yeah, it was really good advice. So yeah, moving on. What does a growth mindset mean to you?
Always learning, never seeing yourself as the finished product. In this series of 10-minute live videos I did recently, I talked about reading business books, for example. So I read a lot of business books. I couldn't count the number of business books I've read in my life, but there are a handful that I have read more than 5 times. So I usually listen to a book. So I'll listen on Audible, and then if I like it, I'll buy it so that I can write on it. And if I really like a book, then I use it. So I don't read business books like novels. It's not like, oh great, I've got to the end of the plot, next one. I read them and I read them and I read them again and implement. So what's a growth mindset? Always be learning.
Yeah, I've been writing up kind of a blog on that kind of general thought for business books, because I generally find if you just read a book once, it's basically you've just built an opinion on it. So it's basically I can rate that book now. I can't really use it or do much. I've read it all and kind of vaguely remembered it, but not really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas you should study a book. If it's a good book, you should like put in the time and like as if you're taking an exam on it or something.
Well, that's precisely the analogy I was about to use. So people who get A's in their A levels and distinctions in their degrees did not revise once. If you want to do something well, typically repetition is a critical part of mastery, isn't it? So the 10,000 hour rule, to become truly to master something, you need to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice, and that's how you get there. And so I kind of I get a little bit irritated, particularly in social media land, with people doing quick wins rather than going deep. So yeah,
depth as well as breadth. It's important. Yeah, I was kind of thinking sort of on the 20-80 rule, it's almost worth sort of putting a book down after the 20% if it's not amazing, because you kind of after 20% of it, you kind of already know most of what's going to happen and like how well you're going to like it, but you need to read it again. So you may as well just stop there and then spend that extra time reading the ones that are really good.
Absolutely right. Which is why I do Audible. So that I always recommend with Watertight marketing that people read it like a novel first time. So you let it wash over you. You don't make any notes. If you don't know how it all comes together, just keep reading. The plot will come together. So you kind of let it wash over you, and then you read it again actively. And so that's what I tend to do when I'm kind of reading a business book. I will listen to it fairly passively, probably in the car. Or whilst running or something, and then I don't always listen all the way through. So there are quite a few I've given up on because they don't fit my values or just doesn't feel right. And then if I like it, I will then read it again in an active way with a notebook that's dedicated to that book and all that sort of stuff. So yes, but you're right. If it's not, I think do a quick, you kind of flick through, you get a sense of the whole thing. You read the first 2 chapters or so, and if it's not, if you don't think you're going to actually implement something in it, then just put it down.
Yeah, cool. Yes, yeah, nice to talk to someone who's been doing the exact kind of same thing as me. Okay, so what's the biggest risk you have taken?
Oh man, how many? I mean, how many? So when I set up on my own in 2008, I left a 6-figure salary. My husband wasn't working. We had just taken on a mortgage commensurate with a 6-figure salary. So I decided to leave and set up on my own. That was quite a big one. Every job I've ever left, I've left without anything to go to. I've left because I don't want to be there anymore, and thought I will find something big. I've invested a lot over my life in learning, and so I paid for an MBA and took time to study that. I spent £20,000 publishing the book.
Wow.
And I've invested in this business. So every penny of the inheritance that I got from my dad, whilst it wasn't a huge amount, but it all went into the business. So I've taken financial risks.
Which of those felt the most like unsure? Because I think it's quite easy for me to sort of appear like I'm a very risky individual, but actually most of the things I do, I've sort of calculated ahead, if you know what I mean. And has no so do you say 20k in publishing the book? If you had already sort of got stuff in plans and you sort of knew what was going to happen, it's hard for me to gauge which one of those would have been the riskiest out of the things you just mentioned.
So I'm although I am a planner and I really am, I probably, the risks I take they're more intuitively taken, I would say. So the other thing that I've always done as a time for money consultant, and indeed, with people who are coming on board to potentially license with us, is that I say no to things. I've turned clients down when I didn't know how I was going to pay the mortgage the next month because I didn't want to work with them, and I knew that taking their money would sap my energy to the extent that I wouldn't have the energy to go and find people I do want to work with. And so by saying no, even though I needed the money in the early years of consultant, I would have, that then forced me to go and do more networking, more speaking, and talking to what it is that I did want. And that's intuitive. Usually in the time for money thing, and also the licensees coming on board with us, I've said no because it just doesn't feel right. And I'm quite happy with that.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting.
I met someone recently actually. Where he had invited me along to a business meeting for someone who wanted us to do some work for. It was a few years ago, so we'd gone along, and he wanted us to do a load of work for some event he was planning or something. It all sounded really good, and the business model looked really good, and but it was a kind of equity-based thing. And I left the meeting, and I said to this friend of mine, "I'm not touching that with a barge pole," but I couldn't tell him why. And when I met up with him a couple of years ago, he said, "What was it that told you that was wrong?" Because he lost a load of money on it. And I said, honestly, can't tell you, but I knew it was wrong.
Yeah, it's one of those where I feel like I'm getting a bit better at that now, because when I was younger, I thought I had that skill, and apparently I didn't. But yeah, I've had like a similar situation with sort of some things that I sort of lost money on, like meetings where it sounded amazing. But now I'm a bit more like, actually, that weird feeling that I sometimes have about stuff, I should go with that feeling as opposed to the logic of what's coming at me. What is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
Gosh, there are so many, really. The kindest one thing. I don't think I can think of a single thing, but the person who's coming into my mind is Cheryl Crichton. So Cheryl is someone that I met in my first agency job in 2004. And she's remained a good friend and colleague. So she was one of the very first licensees, and she's been utterly supportive, utterly generous in the support for the business. And she often was the person who, when I was doing time for money consulting, she would be my extra pair of hands. So she's kind of been alongside me as it's all developed. And I trust her implicitly. I couldn't count the kindnesses because they're many and often, rather than a big moment. Just someone you want in your life. Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice to hear you have something like that. I hope she knows.
She does know. I'm pretty sure she knows. I gifted her 10% of the business to say thank you last year.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I don't hear people doing things like that very often.
Well, they're not me, are they? They didn't grow up a crazy hippie.
No. For the last question of, do you have anything to ask me?
Who would you say your kind of entrepreneurial role models are?
No, like you're the product of like the 5 people you spend the most time with. I guess I've got like a few different sort of people that I kind of aspire towards. Some of which are, say like kind of Richard Branson in terms of building.
You spend a lot of time with him.
Companies. No. So that's more in like the general, like the long thing. But then in terms of like more friends, as in, got one friend who is very like 4-hour work week focused and really good at like scaling himself and working out what's the best way to just
Mr. Efficient.
Yeah, just be efficient about it and like be willing to like lose some money in the short term instead of trying to like get more money out of a customer. If he can get a smaller amount in one email rather than like going over 5 emails, he'll go for like that one and be happy to lose some money kind of, because actually he ends up making more money because he answers like 5 times as many emails. And so he's quite good, and I'm trying to be more like him in that sense. And he's also really good at just like chill out and like finding time to do yoga in a day and being really happy and nice to everyone, which is good. So
it's important.
Nice to actually spend time with people, because when I first ran my first business in the first year, I literally didn't spend any time with anyone. I was just either doing my biology work for my degree, or I was just working the rest of the time. Like I literally didn't see my flatmates at all. And I mean, it was cool to have done that and learn from, but it's not really how I want to run a business the rest of my life.
No.
You should be enjoying it. Other role models. I guess that's kind of half of why I started the podcast, is just to generally try and find the people who I think are the best role models, and then go really deep into finding out more about them and asking questions I probably wouldn't have had time for. Like talking to you, I probably wouldn't have had time to have such a conversation with you, but it's been really good for me, regardless of whether I was going to share it with the rest of the world or not. But it's quite nice to have the excuse.
Yeah, fantastic, and meet and learn and connect with people. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Sam. It's been good to chat to you.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the business model and all the software and stuff come together.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, it feels like you've had a bit of like a logarithmic curve of growth, if you get me. So I'm really excited to see where it goes next.
Yes, you're it's definitely feeling pivotal. I would say the next 3 to 6 months is very much a coming together of lots of moving parts.
Wow, simply wow! It's just so much amazing advice. Basically, everything she spoke about was just a major take-home for me, so trying to pick out my favourites is really quite hard. Number 1, slow and steady. She calls herself the business tortoise, and her book took her 4 years to write, the workbook's another year, and all the rest of the content that she provides and videos and such has been going on ever since, and a well thought out plan of actions and improvements, and it's just genius. Number 2, step away. You can scale yourself by stepping away from your business slightly and not working in your business, but working on it. So it's a very 4-hour work week philosophy, but it forces yourself to get away from like the day-to-day customers and actually work out how to solve the real problems that you're having all the time. Number 3, values. Be true to yourself and don't let people change your values or style. Bryony didn't let anyone change her title or direction of her book to a much greater success. And equally, when she doesn't want to work on things that offer money straight away, she knows that she can keep herself free to work on the things she really values and wants to achieve in the long term. So this helps her avoid getting stuck in the cycle of work that she doesn't want. Number 4, publishers don't help you. You need to do your own marketing, and publishers don't do that stuff for you, and so it's actually really hard to launch a book successfully. Crowdfunding it can be a great way to get some people behind your book and help sell it for you. And it will also motivate you to actually finish the bloody thing. Number 5, study the best books that you read. You don't learn a lot by reading a book just once. You need to reread the really good books several times so that you actually become a knowledgeable person in it and can really make the most of what the book is trying to teach you. This is also why I do the best bits at the end of each podcast, so that 1, I get a chance to remember what it is that's really good about it, and 2, hopefully the fact that you hear these things twice means that you're more likely to remember it than if you just heard it once and then go straight on to the next podcast. And maybe if you plan ahead and you've got like time to write notes at the end of it, you can go, I'll just go straight to the end of the podcast and I can just note down the most important things from it, because just trying to help you guys. So that's the best bits covered, and there was plenty that I haven't highlighted, so if you have any favourites, do let me know on Twitter. I'm sure Bryony would love to hear from you. However, if you think that's all that you have to learn from Bryony, do think again, because firstly, her book is actually amazing, and if you run a business, you should totally read it to sort out your marketing. But secondly, I am launching a brand new podcast called Marketing Mindset. See what I did there with the mindset thing? So it's going to be part of my new business, Postery, which is a platform for easily sending amazing direct mail.
from the safety of your laptop. We give you powerful digital tools that people expect these days, like analytics and personalization and automations, which is something you could never do before with the offline channel of print marketing. And what's more is it's all eco-friendly. Anyway, that's enough about my business. The point is, the podcast with Bryony, who was one of my first guests on the Marketing Mindset, is also awesome, just as much as this one was. Yeah, and marketing is the thing she actually does professionally, so she is just pure genius in all of that as well. So here are just a few clips to give you an idea of what to expect in that podcast. And these are just a few of the many clips that I could have used. Like, the whole thing is really good. So, well, after you've heard this, you definitely haven't heard the whole episode. So yeah, that interview is something that's going to be awesome. You can look forward to it in a few weeks when I launch the Marketing Mindset podcast. And if you run a business or work in marketing, you should definitely check it out.
Behind closed doors, when people talk about the process of marketing, people, they'll say that they are profiling and capturing and using a hook and using a tripwire and then putting a structural lock-in in their products to maintain loyalty. I mean, these are disgusting words. They're disgusting when you think about a human being. And so I genuinely believe that effective marketing is about helping somebody come to a decision with which they remain happy, even if that's not to buy from you. We have a framework called the PP matrix. It's the profit purpose matrix. And if you overlay stuff that's going to make you money and stuff that's going to light your soul, there's an overlay where those things come together, where you should truly focus. And unfortunately, people get they get a little bit bogged down in stuff that might be easier to win, particularly initially, but then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you've done work that you didn't really want to do because you needed the money, and now you get known for doing the sort of work that you didn't really want to do, and now you've got stuff on your website that's case studying the sort of work you don't really want to do, and you get known for it, and so it becomes a downward spiral if you chase just the money. Most businesses in their marketing spend a load of money generating awareness and leads, and then they simply do not have the tools to get somebody over the chasm. So you need to build your marketing backwards. You need to start with an amazing product, a phenomenal customer service. That has to be in place. Then you put in place the tools that convert, the convince and convert tools. And it's only when you've got those that it makes any sense at all to spend money on marketing. And the picture that we paint is of a bucket, funnels and taps. And if you have a bucket with a hole in it, clearly spending money on taps is a complete waste of money. It literally is going down the...
You've listened to an episode of the Growth Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe on your preferred app and give me a good rating. If you are unable to give good feedback right now, try sharing the show with a friend who will, or just wait for the show to improve. If you have any ideas for the show or you just want to reach out, I'd love to talk to you. On Twitter, I am at Sam Harris Tweets, or Instagram, SamJamSnaps.
Show notes, along with links to everything that we discuss, are available at growthmindsetpodcast.com, along with information on how to get involved and blog posts on cool things that you should be aware of.
Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy your next podcast.